order for the Parks, Recreation, Human Services, and Public Safety Committee. We're joined by committee members Lydia Cepha-Dawson and Council Member Greg Baruso, and we are joined by Council President Susan Honda. So first item on the, do we have any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to committee business. Do I have any motion for the minutes of September the 8th?
I move forward to pass the, to approve the minutes from October 3rd. No, today's October 13th. I'm sorry.
September the 8th.
September the 8th. Yeah, September the 8th, 2020 minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. It's been moved by Council Member Cepha-Dawson and seconded by Council Member Baruso to approve the minutes of September the 8th, 2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries. Well, we're moving on to the Portable Toilet Services Contract Amendment. Is there somebody to make the presentation? Gerwen?
Uh-oh, are they having issues maybe?
Nope, I'm coming on now. I just my mouse isn't as fast as you guys. I apologize for that.
Hi there.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me tonight, council members. I've got two barn burners, real exciting ones for you guys to discuss tonight. First one we're going over in the policy question for you tonight is, should the city council amend the contract by adding compensation and extending the term with headquarters portable toilet services and authorize the mayor to execute the contract? And so it's pretty simple. We utilize Santa cans in various locations throughout the park system and at different events, and we expended the amount in that contract, and we're just looking to add funds because the contractor has been performing well.
Council, do you have any questions?
No, I think they're important.
I have a question.
Council Member Baruso.
Hey, thanks, Jay. Chair Coach. Hey, just real quick, Jason. So, how many are there in our parks?
So right now, I believe it's in the staff memo, and it's 13 is what we have in the park system currently, and there are some ebbs and flows in that. We currently have a few more deployed than normal because we have our restrooms closed, and so at Town Square Park and Steel Lake Park, we have put some additional Santa cans there, and then we're kind of expending the money here quicker than we have in the past, and that's because we're having more special event. Not this year, but you know, we have like Blues and Brews and the Diversity Fair and some other ones that are kind of piggybacking on our contract. And so, you know, we get them as we need them, and the demand is there. And then I can tell you, headquarters is a local company. They're out of Auburn, and you can't come close to the rates that they offer.
Okay, thank you, Jason.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Council President.
Thank you. So is this contract for how long?
The contract amendment is, we're going to have to rebid it. This is going to be the third term. And so we're going to expend these funds. So you guys can expect to hear from me probably about the same time next year after, but we'll have to rebid the process to make sure we give equal opportunity to contractors out there. Our policy says 3 amendments or 6 years is the limit. And so, like I say, I full well expect that we'll be rebidding Santa Can sometime next year.
I have another question, Jason.
Sure.
We didn't have any special events since March. So were the portable toilets put out in the parks instead of having staff clean the restrooms? Is that what was going on?
Correct. To alleviate COVID concerns and staff safety, the decision was made that initially we did not deploy Santa cans. We just shut the bathrooms, asked people to, come to the parks, recreate, get your exercise in, and then kind of return home when we were kind of in that lockdown phase of COVID. What we observed and what was the experience out there is that unfortunately community members and park visitors weren't able to do that, and it was becoming a sanitary issue. And so then we had to balance both the sanitary issue and also sanitary issue for your visitors and your staff. And then, you know, we did discuss reopening the bathrooms, but based on the governor's reopening plan, we really feel that it's kind of phase 4 that really kind of is where you do that wholesale reopening. Now, we've had some discussions in regards to when we maybe get to reopening some park facilities modified in phase 3, where you might have soccer teams and that we may revisit that and open our bathrooms at that time. But it was trying to find a balance between staff safety, having sanitation in the park, and not have unsanitary conditions from some of the behaviors of our visitors and park users.
Jason, aren't we having at least a Celebration Park youth soccer already?
We are right now. They are strictly practicing, and they're supposed to be in groups of 5 with a coach. And those durations are what we have worked out with the Soccer Association, kind of a 1-hour duration. And so when we get back to games, we will deploy Santa cans out at Celebration Park in some of those spots where the sports fields are. But it's kind of this balance of having the facilities you need, but also not encouraging and enabling kind of those long extended stays, because we do have an obligation to slow the spread of this virus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, having worked at a water sewer district for 33 years, we had a lot of jokes about the reality of life. So I do have to ask one quick question, and I do think that's very wise too, because there is a problem with diseases, and there are many diseases, not just viruses, that are associated with the, let's call it the end product. Again, with the jokes, but how do they dispose of well, we would have called it the effluent, but how do you dispose of, do they pour it down the sewer storm drain?
Oh, no. All of this is done, and this is why we have the Santa Can contract in place, is so they come out, they deliver the units, they put them into operation, which means it's a bio solution that goes in the tank that does what it does, but they come out with a true like vacuum or Vector type truck.
Oh, a back truck.
They completely suck it out. They have to contain that, and they have to do proper disposal of that. And then they redeploy with fresh water and the chemical that they put in the tank.
Yeah, that's fine. They use a back truck, and then they get a permit, and that's what they do.
Yes, ma'am.
No problem. Thank you very much for explaining that. Do I hear a motion?
Sure.
Let's see, to
I moved to-
approve the proposed amendment.
Yes, I move to forward the proposed amendment to the October 20th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
A second?
Thank you very much. Councilmember Baruso has moved the proposed amendment to the consent agenda for the October 20th meeting. And Councilmember Asefa Dawson has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. So now, Mr. Gerwen, you also have Thundering Oak Enterprises contract amendment.
Yes. Yep. And so on this one, just like with Santa Cans, we have a lot of trees that are on both park property and open space property. And so the Parks Department has had a contract with Thundering Oaks. Not only do they do some tree removal, they do tree hazard assessment, write letters on our behalf. And so the policy question for you tonight is should the City Council amend the contract for tree removal and tree services with Thundering Oaks Enterprising by adding compensation and authorizing the mayor to enter into contract? And again, this is another contractor that we've had on the books for a couple of sessions. They did successfully rebid and re-won the contract on last bid. But trees kind of go through an ebb and flow, and we seem to be in a heavier flow with trees and tree calls this year, kind of the tail end of last year and this year, and they're on the increase, and so we strictly need to add compensation. Now, the way we go about it is if the tree is in a park and it's something that we can handle or manage and assess, we do that in-house. Where a lot of times we use thundering oaks is we have a neighbor and, you know, we look at the tree and go make our assessment of it, and we don't see, our evidence is it dead, diseased, and dying? Otherwise, we don't take out healthy trees. So it's got to meet one of those three criteria. And if we don't see those, but yet the homeowner or citizen or adjacent property owner, you know, wants to challenge us, that's where, you know, that kind of puts us on notice from a legal front. And so then we have to have him come out and assess it and, you know, make that determination just to protect the city's liabilities. And so, like I say, we've been on an upswing on it, and we've had to utilize their services quite a bit this year. And so that's where we're just looking to add compensation to continue to utilize their services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gerd. Councilor, do we have any questions? Council President? No? Do I hear a motion?
Sure, I move to forward the proposed amendment to the October 20, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded, but moved by Councilmember Sepidawson and seconded by Councilmember Baruso to move the Thunder Oaks Enterprise contract amendment for tree services to the October 20th, 2020 consent agenda for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Committee.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
So let's see, we have Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistant FY20 Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program. What a mouthful. Officer Schwan.
I agree with you 100%. They made the title pretty long. The policy question I have for you tonight is, should the Federal Way Police Department accept $132,000+ from the Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Assistance Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program? What that is an amount of money that's been allotted for us by the Department of Justice for law enforcement reimbursement and equipment due to coronavirus. We were notified that we were allotted that money. There is no reimbursement or matching funds necessary for it. And our primary goal with this funding is to purchase IT equipment. So if something similar to a pandemic happens in the future, that we are better equipped to have our staff maybe work remotely and split people's ability to be working from home. So what I'm looking for is a lot of our computers and that type of IT equipment to be replaced with laptops and docking stations. Because right now, all of our detectives work from a desktop computer, and it really hindered us a little bit during the pandemic when we were trying to keep a limited number of detectives here at the station while allowing some of them to work from home. So I think in the future, this would help us out. It would give everyone a docking station and a laptop to work from, as well as not only the detectives, but some other specialty positions as well that would allow us to have these employees work from home. There's also a small amount of that money that's been earmarked for PPE that we will utilize that as well, and we'll stockpile some of that for the city. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, Officer. Council, are there any questions?
Yes, I do have a question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so do you know how many docking stations and laptops you could purchase for that amount yet?
What we've identified is 34.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I have a quick question. Is this an award, a grant that we apply for? Is it something that they are awarding because we're part of a state grant? I'm just curious.
This is not something we applied for. We were notified of the funding availability to us, and it was whether or not we wanted to accept it.
Oh, great. Wow.
Mhm.
Let's hope for more. Appreciate that. Seeing no other questions, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Chair Kochmar.
Thank you.
I move
I
to
sec-
forward the DOJ, Department of Justice Funding Program, to the October 2020 Council agenda, a consent agenda for approval.
Second?
Thank you. Councilmember Baruso made the motion to move the DOJ Bureau of Justice Assistance 20 Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program to the October 20th, 2020 consent agenda, and Councilmember Dawson seconded it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
So now we're moving on with Chief Hwang for the Valley Narcotics Enforcement Team, VNET, U.S. Department of Justice Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, HIDTA, Task Force Agreements. Chief?
Chairwoman Kochmar, Council President Honda, members of the council, good evening. Glad to be with all of you. We're seeking council and council committee approval to continue our participation with the Valley Narcotics Enforcement Team. It's a task force, multi-jurisdiction task force, supervised and managed by DEA. They are in a secretive location within the city limits of Federal Way. And we've had, I would tell you that there's a huge problem with drug trafficking in our country, in our state, in our region. It's fueling much of the violence and crime. So having this task force is critical for our region. I would tell you that when we are doing significant operation, middle level or even high level drug dealers, having a task force like this, having the resource of the DEA is critical, whether we're taking down organized crime with marijuana houses or just tremendous amount of drug that's coming from the Mexican cartel, organized crime. They're very well structured. Not having a team like this and having the federal support, we wouldn't be very effective at all. So I would tell you that they are doing good work on a regular basis, and we would like to continue. So part of this agreement is obviously without council approval, we can't continue to participate with this task force, but this contract allows us to collect, we get reimbursement for overtime expenses. And generally it's around up to $12,000 to $14,000 a year that we can get reimbursed for overtime expenditure for our detective who's signed to the task force. So the policy question for you tonight is, allowing us to continue to be part of this multi-jurisdictional task force with DEA.
Thank you. Council, are there any questions?
Chair Kochmar, I just have a question for Chief Hwang.
Sir.
Hey, Chief, do you folks rotate your detectives out of there? Or how's that work?
It takes a while to develop the skills, and usually we put an individual who already has investigative skills, maybe even worked our own department narcotics team or a detective in general, but it is a 5-year rotation. They rotate out after 5 years. So by the time you really get efficient, it takes about a year or two to be within that unit. And then the chief of police does have the ability to extend someone a year at a time if need be, but it is a highly sought after position. So generally speaking, for career development purposes, we have not extended people after 5 years. We also believe it's good to rotate people out of there. Once you get into that undercover world, generally speaking, detectives don't want to come out, but it's good for them to come out and do patrol work as well, active patrol work, and share that expertise with others.
Wow.
Thank you, Chief. They do great work. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question, Councilmember Brusso. Are there any other questions?
No, I don't have one.
Mm-hmm. So, I know that do we have, Chief Hwang, do we have any more drug activity going on in this area than any other area? Are we more of a crime area than any other area, or would it be relegated to the, I know it's along the I-5 corridor, but than any other city, are we kind of average or statistically?
I think that's really hard to qualify and measure. I think we're living in a very urban environment. And with I-5 corridor, Highway 99, there's a lot of people, going through our community, not just here, but just throughout our region. So I would tell you, this thing stems back from the opioid, crisis. People got addicted to, prescription drugs. We haven't really, recovered as a society from that. I know that has directly contributed to the amount of people that are addicted, that abuse drugs, that has impacted homelessness issue. I think people have kind of forgotten about that, but we haven't fully recovered from that. I can't give you a definitive answer. What I could tell you is that this particular task force, when they give us a monthly briefing to the police chiefs, it's mind-boggling to me the amount of money and drug that is coming through into our community. And when they do intervention, it's amazing to me. I mean, literally like seizing $1 million in cash, from these drug organized crime. There is so much money involved. It's killing our citizens, our residents. Much of the gun violence is drug related. We have people that are addicted to, heroin, small marijuana deals and heroin deals. That's what prompting a lot of these shootings. So drug is a huge problem. But I can't give you a definitive answer. It's a nationwide problem right now. There's tremendous amount of drug coming in, and you may have seen the news coverage of fentanyl drugs coming from China. Most of the drugs are coming up from Mexico, and some of it's coming from China. I think they've tightened the belt on synthetic drugs coming from China. Fentanyl, maybe 100 times more potent than heroin. So, but there's a tremendous demand here. And we've never been able to really reverse that ship in this country. If you go back to the 80s, we implemented DARE, drug abuse resistance education. We thought we could maybe curb that trend by teaching kids it early on. At the end of the day, it didn't work. It didn't work. And we're just back to where we're at. But we're probably a worst case scenario. Maybe, I don't know if it's bad as the 80s, but we're probably approaching that arena because the level of gun violence now in King County, we're going to surpass any other year probably in recent memory as far as violence. We're up 44% in gun-related homicides after 6 months. I've been told that after 9 months, we've already surpassed all of gun violence murders in 2019. We still got 3 months of data to collect. There's nothing to indicate things are slowing down. So we are heading in a wrong direction in terms of gun violence, people being shot. And like I said, I want to tell you the big part of it, not everything, some of it's drug related, gang related, but gang members are involved in drug trade, human trafficking. They'll get into any type of crime that's gonna, make them money, but drug is a big part of it. I hope that answered your question, but I can't tell you. We do have a big problem here. It's hard for me to quantify, measure compared to other regions in the country.
Thank you, Chief. Council, do you have any, Council President Honda?
Thank you. Chief, thanks for the report. When you talk about the gun violence, is that in King County, Pierce County? What are the statistics from?
The main statistics that I have is for King County. Anecdotally, I think it's up in Pierce County, Snohomish County, but the raw data that I have is from the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and that's the data. So we're up significantly this year.
Are we still seeing the fentanyl pills, the pills laced with fentanyl here? Is that still an issue?
it's ebb and flow. Sometimes you don't hear it for a while, and then all of a sudden it'll come up again. But yes, on these seizures, we're still seeing those type of drugs.
And where is the money coming from for people to buy the drugs? I mean, is it coming from burglary, robbery, standing on the street corner holding a sign? Where's the money coming from?
Where is the money coming from, or where is the drug coming from?
Well,
So-
I'm just wondering where people are finding the money to, especially kids.
Sure. I would tell you that, yeah, people are buying drugs on the streets, and where do they get? It depends. Some people have jobs and they make money, so they're able to buy drugs. Some people are committing robberies. And I mean, you've seen all the marijuana stores recently getting robbed, right? It's so lucrative if you do that type of robbery, and all of a sudden now you have drugs to sell. So that's how drug dealers make money, whether they get it for a cheaper price. Everybody takes a cut. So everybody along the line is making money, selling those drugs. And there's a tremendous money to be made. I shared with you a marijuana home, for example, can net $1 million a year if you don't get caught. Till you get caught, you're netting $1 million a year per house. And then you got tremendous profit that's being made by heroin. Now, methamphetamine, for example, used to be made domestically, but the government took steps to eliminate the precursor drugs. They were harder to find. So basically the Mexican cartel has taken over even making, a methamphetamine, synthetic drug. It's all made in Mexico. And then heroin, everything is pretty much coming up from Mexico. And then synthetic drugs like fentanyl, a lot of it's coming from China. So everybody along the line is making money selling drugs. But yes, money's being made by either jobs, or they're robbing people, they're committing burglaries, they're pawning things. And once you get hooked onto that drug, I've been told that nothing matters but continuing to do that, do those drugs. So that's where the violent crime starts to come along. And then every drug dealing, everybody brings a gun to it. And if something goes wrong, somebody comes to rob instead of buying, or somebody gets nervous, then you got shots that ring out. And that's what's killing the young men and women, predominantly young men, in all throughout the country.
Thank you. Council President.
Thank you. Chief, when in King County, do you know the average age of a drug addict that might go in for treatment or might be arrested for something?
Well, typically we see more of the drug abuse, addiction occurring with the homeless population. They tend to be the older group. I would tell you, 30s, 40s, maybe even up to 50. So in that range is where we're seeing most addicts. Here's the reality of what's happening is that we take Salvation Army folks or other social services to many of our homeless camps with our special operations unit. And I could tell you that 99.9% of the time, they completely refuse services. So that's our experience. But the idea is that we continue to bring the social workers with us, try to let them establish relationship. We even give distance. When our officers they're talking with social workers, we even back off, let them talk with the social workers. What we're hearing is even with the social workers, they're not going with them. Even when they tell them, we have a shelter for you. If you give us 2 or 3 days, we can find a place for you. The answer is typically no. So when they're hooked on these drugs, they don't want to be anywhere there's rules. They just want to continue to get their fix. So it's hard to break the cycle until somebody wants help. But what I'm telling you is that what I'm hearing on the street is if people want resource, typically they could find it for you. But now if everybody wanted it, we'd have a problem. But what we're experiencing is most people don't want it. If a handful of people do want it, it looks like there is resource for them.
Is the cost of buying drugs increasing for the homeless population? I've heard that, so I'm just checking out something I was told.
Yeah, at that level, you know what? I haven't gotten any briefing on that.
Okay.
level. So I don't know, but some of the stuff they can, depending on what you consider, cheap, but they will steal things, go to the pawn shop. If they pocket 20 bucks, then they got something. Then what they try to do at the lower level is try to sell some drugs themselves, make some profit on it so they can maybe feed their own habit in return, right? So everybody at every level is trying to make some money so they can continue to profit and, feed their habit. And some people don't have drug, they're just clearly bringing, tons of the stuff in. And organized crime is where they're making all the money, millions of dollars, even billions.
It's a sad situation.
It is.
It is. I talk about it because you've heard me talk, how do we turn the ship around? We got to fix this social issue of drug abuse and addiction. That's one problem. If we don't, it's going to be tough. And it usually hits communities of poverty harder. People who have less median income tend to drink more, abuse drug more. These are me speaking. You can go to King County Public Health and, on their website, you see these things. And you look at communities that have less median income, generally have more social issues, more housing issues, more problems. You go to very affluent communities, they tend to have less problems.
But they still do have problems. They're not problem free.
Of course, I'm just saying they have less. When you have money and resources, you don't have housing issue. You tend to take care of your health better. You tend to have just better, less issues.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilmember Sabat-Dawson.
Thank you so much. And it's unrelated. I guess yesterday I heard that somewhere in the state of Washington, marijuana growing or production was shut down for selling it out of state. And I don't know if you knew anything about that and why they were being shut down for shipping it out of state.
Yeah, the Liquor Control Board, Liquor Control Cannabis Board, they have officers who are fully commissioned. They specialize and they do those type of enforcement. In terms of selling out of state, I don't know if that's even allowed or not, but sometimes you got to watch those type of businesses because you can only produce so much. And what do you do with leftover marijuana? Do you really, burn it, get rid of it, or does some of that bleed out into the black market? That's always been a concern about these legitimate grows, companies that grow it as well as can some of it somehow, leak out into the black market and people want to profit from it because there's always a greed factor, with people. So, the Liquor Control Board regulates that and control that. It's really not within our hands. But what I could tell you is that legalization of marijuana, there's a feedback coming. If everybody could mute okay, it stopped. What the legalization of marijuana and the retail market was supposed to eliminate street level, street dealing and so forth. What I can tell you is right now it's made the matter worse because there's a market for the black market. Some people don't want to pay retail price for marijuana, so they're going to buy marijuana on the black market. And we've had many, many shootings. Now, this is where the lower level drug dealing occurs with teenagers, underage people, not always underage, but when we investigate shootings and involve teenagers, quite often it's a marijuana drug transaction. If you recall Jennings murder, the Taco Bell campus and 21st, that was I just remember the young man's last name, I apologize, but it's Jennings. That was a drug deal, very low level, where we had a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old kill a 17-year-old young male at a very low, but typically it doesn't result in a homicide, but a lot of our shootings of young teenagers have been marijuana deals. So legalization of marijuana has not eliminated the black market. In fact, it's fueled it, and it's worse than ever before.
Well, personally, I think that what we should be part of our request for our legislators is to ask for more drug treatment beds, more of a you know, I don't know how to stop the stem, but I do know that we can save some lives in our community by providing treatment programs. We do have private companies, private businesses run by private individuals in our community that are providing what I would consider a halfway house, or a house where people who are trying to become alcohol and drug free live in a situation where they get help from their peers. And I actually think that we should be encouraging that. Maybe we can't solve the whole problem, but we can solve some problems.
I'm all in favor of getting, you know, they run in, if there's a criminal justice system is involved, if some way we can get them into a treatment, court ordered, or they're forced to do it, I'm all in favor. I am not a proponent for, you know, having to lock people up for everything. I'm not asking for that. But on the other hand, you know, bottom line is we get them off the street, get them treatment. It's public safety.
Yeah, I know that, you know, right now it's a difficult time, but I do know that there were, I'm sure it's been made worse, the drug problem, by being locked down. But particularly if they're home in their families and no money, and they're dealing with a drug problem or an alcohol problem, and then abuse occurs, and it's just a vicious cycle. But I do know that when I was in the legislature 4 years ago, that was one of the goals of the legislature, was to provide more beds statewide, but more beds for when an individual is taken to the hospital by the police for being out of their mind on some type of drug, they don't have a bed to release them to after 24 hours or whatever. And it would be nice if we could get involved somehow, not the city per se, but to encourage the legislature, have that be one of our goals. So perhaps that's something we can look at. Well, if there are no other questions, do I hear a motion?
Sure, I move to forward the proposed amendment to the October 2020 agenda for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
The amendment or agreements on the motion.
See, we're talking about
Did I say it wrong?
Because
Oh yeah, you're right. I read the wrong one. Okay, go ahead.
it's agreement.
thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Peruso.
I will second with the revised agreements.
The
Yes.
agreement.
Thank you,
Okay.
the task force agreements. Thank you very much. So we've had the item E on the agenda, without repeating it all. Motion by Councilmember Savadasan and seconded by Councilmember Peruso. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you so much. Moving on to, finally, we have something where we can actually read what's going. Item F, which is the Valley Independent Investigation Team Agreement. Again, Chief Hwang.
Yeah, with this one, I will start off with a policy question. Should the City of Federal Way Police Department enter into a Valley Independent Investigation Team VIT agreement? So initiative I-940 was passed a couple of years ago. That became House Bill 1064, which was compromise bill related to I-94. And as part of that, the 1064 bill came known now as LATISA, Law Enforcement Training Community Safety Act. And part of the requirements, part of this reform, is that you have to have the capability of an independent officer-involved shooting investigations. So in terms of South King County, we were already ahead of the game, meaning that we already had an independent investigation team known as VIT, Valley Investigative Team. So we had that in place already. So we weren't investigating our own officer-involved shootings already prior to Initiative 940. However, with Initiative 940 and House Bill 1064, there were a lot of other changes that came along about family involvement, having community representatives as part of this investigation, You have to provide, crisis intervention training, de-escalation training. So there were a lot of requirements that we had to address the reform request. So I want you to know that your agency, Federal Way Police Department, is in full compliance of this. Now, although we've been doing these independent investigations, now we're formalizing it with involved agencies. So you have Auburn, Des Moines, Federal Way, Kent, Renton, Tukwila, and Port of Seattle are all part of this VIT, Valley Independent Investigation Team. So when we have a shooting in any of our jurisdictions, the VIT would be activated. They would do the investigation. Now, when the investigation is done, what happens with it then is that then it goes to the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and they will look at that. Now the standard has changed. There used to be a malice component and a good faith factor in order to prosecute an officer, but they eliminated the malice portion. Now it's just good faith standard, but it goes to the prosecutor's office for a review. They will determine whether there'll be any criminal charges on the officer or not. After that, there's also an inquest that occurs in King County. Now, things are on hold, as you know, because there's a lawsuit associated with that, but you go through an inquest process. So that is the process. And ultimately, there's always potentially looking at this case through the civil courts, potential lawsuit. But I guess what we're asking committee and council approval is for us to formally enter into an agreement with these jurisdictions to sign an agreement to do Valley independent officer involved shooting investigations. So I hope that gives you a macro overview of what this is all about.
Council, are there any questions? Council President Honda, were you raising your hand there or not?
I do. Chief, is there so when there's an officer involved shooting and this investigative team is put together, are there standard officers from each of these jurisdictions that meet and investigate, or do you assign someone when the call comes in? How does that work?
The team is already formed. So a typical formation of the team will be each jurisdiction will dedicate like four detectives, and they have to have certain level of training and experience. So not anybody can be a bid investigator. Then you will have a commander for each agency assigned to the task force. So each jurisdiction involved will have a team of detectives. So let's say Kent has an officer involved shooting tonight. The team will be activated from each jurisdiction. So 4 detectives, commander will respond. Now we have to take into consideration, not everybody's available for every call out, but the team is big enough that we hope that when we have a call out, you have adequate number of detectives and supervisors that will respond to the shooting incident. And then we also have a deputy chief level. Right now it's Deputy Trevor from the Tukwila, deputy chief from Tukwila. He is the executive level kind of overseer of this team. And then this team, deputy chief and the commander, lead commander for VIT will do a report to the participating jurisdiction chief once a month. So we have a meeting once a month and they brief us, update us on the cases that we're working on. So for example, if King County Sheriff's Department was in Federal Way and they were involved in an officer involved shooting, VIT would be activated. And most likely Federal Way will be the lead agency because it's within our city. If it's an unincorporated King County, VIT will investigate it. But if we have, let's say, a shooting, I don't want to mention our city, bring us bad luck or anything, but let's say it happens in Auburn. It's very possible King County will come down and possibly assist do the investigation for us. We have to kind of trade. So the chiefs have agreed that we do it on a rotating basis because it's a significant investigation and very time consuming. So we will make sure with like other jurisdictions, make sure let's rotate. And then also with King County, do some back and forth. So we have equal number in terms of who's done how many. But this agreement is important. It's essentially required by law. It's a WAC law that requires us to have these type of teams. We're just more formalizing it, coming into council and saying, here's why we're doing it. We're seeking your approval to enter into an agreement.
I have another question, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So when our 4 detectives are called out to be part of this investigative team, are they unable to do the work that they were doing previously? And does someone cover their work here at the city?
Well, their cases more likely will be on hold. Let's say if they're working on a real priority type of case, it might be reassigned, but maybe the lieutenant says, all right, detective, I'll just make Detective Novak. I want you to just do canvassing and not get that detective involved in anything real significant, not be the lead of that investigation, so that he can go back and work on a very important or priority case. So the supervisors know what cases they're working on. There's a little bit of art to it. But yes, if you're a lead investigator for that officer involved shooting, you ain't doing anything for probably a month.
Okay.
You're going to be, coordinating everything and putting everything together. Then you're waiting for lab results and think there'll be some slow time. Maybe you can work on something else. But if, a couple of detectives will be tied up for weeks on a shooting case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question also.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So if the situation involves one of our officers, would the team members from Federal Way not participate in that investigation?
Correct. Initial responding officers will do, crime scene protection, render first aid, take care of those things, but we would not be involved at all. What's a little bit different, I failed to mention, is right now, when these investigations occur, it's a criminal investigation. So we will not be involved at all. There's no influence from the police chief, other than the initial briefing relatively quickly to me so that I could speak with the media on the issue. After that, it's a criminal investigation. Any statements that our officers make, if it's compelled, it's not shared with the investigative team. It's done like a criminal investigation. Unless the officer volunteers their statement, generally speaking, their attorney is going to tell them, we don't do voluntary statements. So then, generally speaking, if there's nothing criminal on the initial surface of the investigation, generally speaking, I will compel the officers to provide statements. But those statements are not used in a criminal investigation. It cannot be used anymore, period, because of what's changed with Initiative 940.
So the members, the members from Federal Way, at that point, their responsibility stops.
Yep,
And then other members participate. Okay, thank you.
We won't even respond. We would sign a liaison detective. What do you need from us? And they'll make the request that we get everything that goes over there. It's got to be we got to make sure nothing is compelled, because if it gets tainted, the whole investigation is compromised.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, do I hear a motion to formalize the agreement for the bid?
Make a motion, Chair Kochmar.
Thank you.
I moved forward the proposed agreement to the October 20th, 2020 Council Consent Agenda for approval.
I second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to forward the VIT investigation team agreement to the consent agenda at the October 20th, 2020 consent agenda for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Unanimously approved. So now we're moving on with, thank you very much, Chief Hwang. Appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye.
Bye.
Now we're moving on with Ms. Bridgeford. Sarah, are you on? Hi. Hi, Sarah. So now we're going to be talking about pooling the funds between South King Housing and Homelessness Partners, cities related to affordable and supportive housing. Go ahead, Ms. Bridgeford.
Thank you. This evening, I will be presenting the resolution pertaining to pooling of the House Bill 1406 funds. The policy question before you, that would go before Council, is should the City Council adopt a resolution to pool funds collected in accordance with RCW 82.14.540, with some but not all other SCIP cities. And as a reminder, SCIP stands for the South King Housing and Homelessness Partners. It is a group that was established to coordinate efforts in South King County on affordable housing and homelessness. It consists of 9 cities and King County. So we have 9 different 10 member jurisdictions. House Bill 1406 was an opportunity for jurisdictions to recapture a portion of the existing sales tax. The City of Federal Way and its City Council did adopt an ordinance to recapture that portion of the sales tax last fall. In early 2020, in February, the City Council also passed a resolution supporting supporting pooling of the funds collected under 1406. Those funds would allow the city to pool their funds with the other SCIP jurisdictions. The funds could then be used for the acquisition, rehabilitation, or construction of affordable housing. They could be used for operations and maintenance. And for cities with populations less than 100,000, they could be used for rental assistance as well. With pooling, the recommendation was that it would have more leverage for all the jurisdictions to pool their funds together. Capital projects, as you know, are expensive even for rehab to retain the existing affordable housing that we have. It is a costly endeavor, and the 125,000 that we would be capped at with this funding source doesn't quite get us there for the projects that we would be looking at. The recommendation is still to pool funds. The reason we're bringing an updated resolution before you this evening and hopefully to City Council next week is that several cities have had to make a hard decision to reallocate a portion of those funds to rent assistance during COVID-19. They're smaller cities that don't have the same opportunities that we do with our CDBG and other funding sources, and they did decide to, on a temporary basis, allocate a portion of those funds. They do plan to revisit that decision at the end of the year. The difficult position that we find ourselves in is that the resolution that was passed earlier this year was very specific that all cities had to pool their funds. So the resolution that's before you this evening will gauge interest of the cities, including the City of Federal Way, and our commitment to pooling funds. What we're asking is that this language does not explicitly say that all other cities must pool. You may be thinking, well, if not all cities have to pool funds, then what does that look like for any projects that would be part of this Housing Capital Fund with SCIP? And the answer to that is, as we've talked about all along, that a Housing Capital Fund with SCIP would allow the cities that are pooling funds to have say into the projects that are funded. There's an executive board that is comprised of members from each of the jurisdictions. They would be part of that process, communicating with City Council and others throughout the city on potential projects that would occur within the City of Federal Way. Projects would be cited in cities that do pool funds. The interlocal agreement that we would enter into for this pooling would have further details on what we would call equity of funding. So if cities join the pooling later on, what does that look like for a proportion of those funds to be spent on projects that are later on? I would just add one last piece that the interlocal agreement will be coming to City Council should you still commit to pooling funds. We should see that by the end of the year, early next year. There will be opportunities for input from our law department and others along that way, and we'll present that item to you for consideration. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Council? Council President? Seeing none, may I hear a motion?
Sure. I move, I'm sorry, okay. I move the proposed resolution to the consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Okay, so we are on item G. We are moving the resolution to pool the funds between South King County Housing Partners cities related to affordable and supportive housing, sales and tax use, as authorized by Substitute House Bill 1406 to the consent agenda for approval on October the 2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you for the motion, Councilmember Sevadasan, and for the second, Councilmember Brusso. I believe my Council President, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're supposed to reiterate who makes the motion and who seconds it on each item.
Yes,
So,
it's always a good idea.
yeah, thank you very much. Okay. All right. Well, moving forward to item H. Again, Ms. Bridgeford, South King County Housing and Homeless Partners 2021 budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this evening I am presenting the South King Housing and Homelessness Partners 2021 budget, and the policy question will be, should City Council approve the proposed South King Housing and Homelessness Partners, or SKIP, budget? This budget is in accordance with the interlocal agreement that the city has entered into for SKIP. It will allow SKIP to implement their work plan, which will also be before you this evening. It will become effective upon approval by each jurisdiction and their legislative authority. So each city council is considering this along with King County Council, and the time at which each participating jurisdiction has passed it, the budget will be implemented. The nice thing with this budget is it will have a flat funding for each city. So our contribution would be $26,000. That was done in recognition of the budget situations that most of us are in light of COVID-19. We were able to achieve that with strategic hiring with SKIP. They delayed hiring of the second position, and it has been structured in a way that it will be a 3/4 time position rather than a full-time, in part so that we can keep that budget level during these tough times. The budget, like I said, will allow for implementation of the work plan, and our contribution of $26,000 is currently included in the proposed 2021 through 2022 city budget. May I answer any questions?
Council?
Yes, Sarah, was it 26.5 the last 2 years?
Did I just read that wrong? I could have noted that incorrectly. No, it should have been, it hasn't changed. So it is still 26,000.
It's 26, okay. Thank you.
That's correct.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion, Chair Coach Moore.
Mm-hmm.
I move to forward the proposed SKIP, South King Housing and Homeless Partners 2021 budget to the October 20th, 2020 consent agenda for approval.
I second.
All right. The motion has been made by Councilmember Brusso and seconded by Councilmember Sevadasan to move the South King County Housing and Homeless Partners 2021 budget to the consent agenda for the October 20th meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so much. So now we're on to the last item on the agenda, which again is Ms. Bridgeford for the South King County Housing and Homeless Partners Work Plan.
Thank you. The policy question will be, should City Council approve the proposed SKIP 2021-2022 work plan? This work plan is divided into three areas, and I'll go over each of those areas. This should sound at least somewhat familiar. The council did receive a briefing on the proposed work plan on May 19th, 2020. That briefing was provided by Angela Sanfilippo, who is the executive manager of SKIP. The three areas have not changed. The only significant changes that you might note are statements on equity and additional accountability measures that have been added to that work plan based on conversations with jurisdictions as well as the SKIP Executive Board. Otherwise, it should be very similar to what was reviewed at that May Council meeting. The first area in the work plan is governance and procedures. This area covers the startup of SKIP with the addition of Angela Sanfilippo as staff, She has been able to work with the executive board to develop the budget and work plan. And then the other accomplishment or the work area within that work plan is the advisory board. That board is comprised of members from throughout South King County. They're in the process of establishing that right now, and it will have input on the work of SCIP, and that falls into that first area. The second area is policy and planning. One of the things that SCIP was established to do is to have that regional approach to affordable housing, bringing together the South King cities for that stronger voice in accessing revenue and having coordination and planning processes in place. One example of this will be with the SCIP Housing Capital Fund that I mentioned when talking about the pooling resolution for 1406. That is a great example of what would fall into this category. With that, Angela and the board are also working on other like policy areas, coordinating with the Affordable Housing Committee, trying to look at the policies and programs that exist so that they can enhance access for affordable housing in South King, as well as retain the housing that we have. The third area is outreach and education. Angela, as the executive manager, represents South King County at many regional and local forums. She is furthering the agenda of SCIP, learning about the policies and programs that are taking place, and getting familiar at this point with the groups throughout the county. In this area, she will have further engagement with the cities as she gets established. She did start right before COVID-19, so I spent most of her time in remote work, and I think that the presence will continue to increase as we come out of COVID-19. But she is going to be somebody that you will have some interaction with. She'll provide different briefings to our city as well as the others, and looking at that education in particular. The one thing I didn't note, but I think is just kind of worth noting on the policy and planning is that I had a note here, and I apologize. The Housing Action Plan, which you've heard about from the Planning Division at the City of Federal Way. Angela is supporting all of the jurisdictions of SCIP in that process, so she's been engaged at a few different points and will be moving forward as well. So we're seeing that intersection of her expertise and the expertise with SCIP, how we can have a sub-regional action in addition to our city-specific strategies. The work plan is consistent with the SCIP interlocal agreement and operationalizes the priorities that have been established by SCIP. It will encourage collaboration, formulate strategies at the local and sub-regional level, and support the implementation of other policies and programs that relate to affordable housing. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Council, have any questions?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sarah, for all of these three presentations that you just gave us. My question is, with the interlocal, with SCIP, how do I ask this? What's the level of involvement from HDC at this point? Are they partners? Are they part of it? Or have they, what's their role?
That's a good question. So HDC is they don't have a voting membership on SCIP, and they have stepped back as well from the staff working group. So part of the structure is that there is the executive board comprised of members of each of the jurisdictions, and then there's a staff working group staffed by myself and planners throughout South King County. For some amount of time leading up to the establishment of SCIP, and then also during the transition, HDC did provide a lot of guidance to that staff working group and the executive board, and they are no longer doing that, and that is intentional. The role that they play in the region is often one of advocacy, and they're able to fulfill their mission in other ways, and that are served by not being in that role with SCIP.
Thank you. They hosted a great town hall meeting last night, so just curious about their involvement in SCIP at this point. Thank you so much.
And if I may, I would just say that still certainly connected. When we talk about the regional forums and groups that Angela is part of, and that many of us as staff are also part of, HTC is at those tables as well. So there's still a lot of interaction occurring and coordination. It just looks a little bit different than it did in the establishment of SCIP.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
Sure. I move to forward the proposed SCIP 2021-2022 work plan to the October 2020 consent agenda for approval.
Second.
All right, the motion has been made by Councilmember Dawson and seconded by Councilmember Brusso. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Ms. Bridgeford. Good work. Good work, Ken. Well, now we're moving on. Are there any other items for the good of the committee? Seeing none, we do have two that were added, and I would like to ask Council President Honda if she'd like to, Ms. Bridgeford, stay here because I think some questions might be answered by you. President Honda, could you talk about topic A and B, accurate count
Sure.
of the homeless and the community forums?
Sure. So thank you, Sarah, for being here. I hope your day's been going good. Oftentimes as council members, we get questions from the public about the homeless folks in Federal Way, homeless camps. I'll get emails when people see a camp being cleaned up and they want to know where, what services were offered for those in the camp, how big the camp was. And my thought was that we could have a, maybe not monthly, but quarterly update from staff on where the camps are located, if they are being cleaned up, how big the camps are. I know when Councilmember Johnson and I went with a police officer a couple years ago through some of the camps, one tent was considered a camp. You know, to me, I was a little surprised by that. I had thought that a homeless camp consisted of several tents, not just one. So, you know, when you hear that Federal Way has, let's just say 90 camps, you know, it really upsets people. But that could be, and that's just a made up number. We could have maybe 10 active camps and the rest were camps that had been cleaned up. So I'm thinking that council would be served well if we could get accurate information and timely information so that when we are asked questions, we know what's going on in this area. Is that something that we could, is that asking for too much or is that doable?
And you're asking if that would be something that I would provide on the encampments?
I don't know who would provide it.
Okay, I think that that is actually a question that would be better suited for the police department and Chief Hwang. I don't have anything to do with encampments. As he mentioned earlier today, he does coordinate with social service providers for outreach services like Salvation Army, CCS, and others. Will go out with them. So it's interconnected, but I'm not the data person on encampments, and that would be a question I'd be happy to follow up with him and see how frequently he would be able to give that report. We would be more on the service side in looking at access of services and understanding, you know, who's engaging with our social service providers and is also experiencing homelessness.
So, Council President Honda, I'm wondering, and Sarah, the executive, let's see, I think it's an executive manager for the SCIP program. There, I see that on the attachment, that there's an executive manager and a program coordinator. By the way, I'm just wondering who that would be and whether they would have that kind of information broken out by city.
No, I think that the encampment data, if you're looking specifically for encampment data, that would be through our police department
Okay.
and would be something that we would want to look at. You would be more likely to get some analysis on the point in time count. We've talked about the point in time count before. You know, that it doesn't have the same local data that it used to. It
Okay.
gives us some regional view. I think the question on encampments is best suited for our police department.
Okay. Well, then I guess I can follow up with the chief about that, if that's okay, Councilmember Kochmar.
Thank you. I'd love to hear a report at the next meeting.
Okay. One other question, Sarah. Is the point in time count going to happen this year? Have you heard anything about that?
It is an excellent question. When I was looking at data and information pertaining to tonight, it is actually something that I started thinking about. I'm not sure what that would look like. It has to happen. I do believe that it is in the federal regulations that it occurs. I don't know what that would look like with COVID and considerations that would keep both volunteers and people experiencing homelessness safe. As you know, you participated in the count before. There's a training that would make that difficult, and you're going out in groups that are not necessarily from your households. It would change the mode of implementing that count significantly, and it's a good question. I will be following up on.
Okay. Because we do, the more information we have about who is homeless in our city and where they're at, the more we're better to help them. So we do need the information. I'm not sure if that count really helps us get the most accurate information there, but it would be interesting how they would do that. Because the last 3 years that I've done it, where I'm in a car with 2 or 3 other people, and they're not from my household. You're right. So that would be a little different.
Yes, and it is critically important. It is one of the factors that goes into our federal funding on homelessness. We see it as essential. It is imperfect as a count that occurs, on one evening, and it's as many of you know, when you go out and you're counting, it's what you see as visible. We miss so many people, and it doesn't, as a data point, it doesn't show us the scope of homelessness over the course of a year. It is just for that night, but it is still a critical piece of information that I imagine that we have to do in some way. So I'll follow up with King County and see what planning they're doing in relation to the count.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bridgeford. And Councilmember Honda, did you have just wanted to discuss community forums?
Oh yes, community forums. So as we all know, the mayor has started the community forum for the Black and African American folks here in Federal Way, which is great. Tomorrow is their second meeting. The Korean quarterly meetings have been going on for, I think this is the 26th year or the 27th year. And both of those forums appear to be very different. The Korean quarterly meetings, I've attended quite a few and have presented at several. It's information based on what's happening in the city with road projects, with community development. All of the directors are there, or many of them are there, and they talk about their department, and then it's translated into Korean for those folks who English isn't their primary language.
And good food.
Yes, and they always have food, which they provide. I want to make sure everyone knows that they provide that. The city does not provide that. The African American Black Forum, Community Forum, appears to be different, and we'll see how tomorrow's goes. I haven't seen the agenda, and I don't know what the setup is. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops over time, and what the focus of that forum will be, you know, what kind of information it is that they are requesting from the city, and how we get that information to them. But I'm wondering as a council if we are interested in any other community forums. I know that Councilmember Brusso has been on the Diversity Commission. I was on the Diversity Commission. We had talked at one time at that point, which for me was 9 years ago, of having a Hispanic community forum, but it was very difficult to form and to get that going. So I don't know if there are any other communities we want to reach out to as a council, or encourage the mayor to reach out to as a council, or if we just want to leave it as it is.
I would like to see an immigrant. That way then it might not be as difficult, because our communities are smaller than the Korean community, of course, and or the African American, but I think collectively there's quite a number, and we do share a lot of historical backgrounds, right, as immigrants, and experiences, and, you know, lived experiences and stuff. So I think that might be something you might want to consider. And
so what would that look like?
So even the information sharing is great, but for immigrant population, it's, first of all, City Hall is like a far reach place for them, because yeah, you don't go there. It's like you avoid it. And so to make it accessible, to make it to bring it to the community, so that they see the council, the mayor, city staff are human beings, and they are really accessible. You can ask questions. So the forum could be where the mayor used to have his quarterly, you know, where you do a little presentation, and then information sharing. But
So like in the school?
Wherever. But I think going out into the communities, of course.
Yeah.
And maybe when you said schools, I was thinking maybe we could combine it, but that would be too long. And then the other part could be, or maybe, having booths for the different departments, right? It could be like Passport.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Right.
Passport. Where do you go when you want to upgrade your house? Do you have to? I mean, do you have to really go to City Hall? Can you just do it yourself? What would that look like? So having Q&As, or having those different areas for people to visit and talk to. Same with police. You know, what happens when you get tickets? What do you do, and how do you handle that? So I think it would be really good. And then if they have any questions about schools, then it's something we can share with the schools. So having a representation from there, they may not be part of the Q&A, but they could at least address any concerns, or they can take notes back. But I think somehow collaborating with the school district, but also making that space available for that community would be amazing. But the one challenge would be having interpreters available, and getting the word out, because we don't have things translated into other languages. But it's got to be something that we do translate into the various languages that that are necessary. And then maybe it could be a phone app or whatever that does the translation when they're present. But that should be something.
Okay.
I don't know. I didn't think about it, but yeah, I might have more ideas, but that's what just came to mind as you were saying it.
Okay. Councilmember Baruso, what do you think?
Right, and Councilmember Dawson and Council President Honda, you know, as on the Diversity Commission, we try to get so many forums together. So it's the biggest thing, you know, we found was number one, advertising. How do you get the word out? The other one was, is it just you come together with a subject or a objective in mind, or do you just let it pan out and everyone just asks questions? Because that was one of the biggest things, to come up with what subjects do you want to talk about if you want to talk about something. What interests the community, right? We have to find out what their interests are before you step in there, because you could have all kind of questions we won't have any answers for. So how do you get that out there to even, you know, to form that that type of thing. And that was the biggest things I remember, and you probably do too, when we try to get forums together. Where you do it, senior forum or anything like that, is where do you do it? How do you get it advertised? And what subject do you want to talk about in that particular time? Do you move forward again with something else later on in the next forum, or do you just keep going and just start answering questions? It's the format too that you have to kind of build, right, of how we want to do it to make sure that it's going to be sustainable and something that they come back to. Because if we don't have any answers for things, then it's kind of like we're going to waste everyone's time, their time. They're going to feel that way, and then we have to have some type of objective what we're looking for.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to step on the toes of the Diversity Commission because I know that they're still trying to get forums together.
Right.
I was thinking more along the lines of the Korean community quarterly meetings, and then the Black African American meetings. That as a city council, that we might want to keep that moving forward with other groups of folks. So I don't want to step on the toes of the Diversity Commission. I want them to continue to do what they're doing, and not feel like we're impeding what they're doing.
No, but it's so.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So within their work plan to do things, and we could still form what we want to do too, or we could carry on and work together to say, hey, just like everything, just come together and have one stop shop, where people answer questions and get answers. And then, also it's kind of like timing, like anything, when do we have it? What time of year? What's more advantageous? Summertime, springtime? Do you have one quarterly? Yes. Can you? That kind of thing. But I know where you're going with it. Thank you.
Actually, I don't see it being so, it's not stepping on anybody's toes, because what the Diversity Commission is doing is different from what I think we're talking about. I think we are saying city services. What can we do? What can we improve on? How can we help you? And give them information like we do with the Korean quarterly meetings, because we're updating, we're informing, we're providing, and making sure that they understand what those are. The Diversity Commission's approach is completely different. But if we want to have some kind of anytime there is a gathering, people bring different foods, or we order foods from ethnically run businesses or restaurants. I mean, that could be part of where Diversity Commission could come into partnering with us. So I think it could be done. But I think they're two separate views and approaches. But maybe once a year or so, we put our forces together. And have like a fair or whatever, right?
Right.
But otherwise, I think our role is information sharing and making sure that our communities are served.
Right.
And I think partnering is a good thing, like you said, because it brings everyone together and brings all with our commissions together and our council together as one.
Absolutely.
And then we have one voice.
Yeah.
So partnering is a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like there's an interest in moving forward with something like this.
I think so.
I don't know where my thumb is. I was trying. Oh, there. Thumbs up.
I see it.
It went. I don't know where it was going. Yes.
Okay. What do you think, Councilmember Kochmar?
I'm thinking about staff time. I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
So perhaps maybe what we might do is keep continuing to discuss this. Talking with some of the people in our community. I know we have Ukrainians that are newly immigrated. We have, I just talked with somebody, I think from Ghana just the other day. Not that they were immigrated, they got here, coming here for a conference and got stuck for like 4 months because they couldn't get back because there were no plane trips. But I guess what I need to know really, and maybe we could talk with some of the churches that are organized over, a lot of these folks, when they come to a community, they'll join the church of their choice and feel that may be one of the ways that they can actually communicate with somebody, but at the same time get the information they need. So maybe we could talk with some of the different churches in the area to see if there's any interest. But rather than going headlong into something, I think it's just something we should dialogue about for a while, because I really think, my opinion, is that we should be fair with everybody. And if we're going to have a forum with one community group and a forum with another community group, it should be open so that if there are other groups of folks that want to have discussions with the city, they should be able to make that known, and we should be able to try to accommodate that. Now, we may not be able to do that all at once, but if there's a pressing need, sure, why not? So these are some of the things we can talk about, not in a formal process, but just continue to discuss over time and bring it back up at a future meeting. Will that work for you, Council President?
Sure. And I don't see doing something like this over Zoom. I think that would be really impersonal. And, you know, you all know I'm ready to be done with Zoom. So I see that, this will take a lot of planning. It will take a lot of work to get to our very first event. And by then we will not be on Zoom. I swear we will not be on Zoom. We will be in person, safely in person. But if there's interest, we'll continue to discuss. We can have small meetings, and if that's okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Why don't we bring this up again? Thank you, Councilmember Savedassan. I'll just say this really quick. Maybe we could just bring it up again after the first of the year, one of the meetings then, because November 10th is going to be our next meeting, and we're going to get into Christmas. So maybe after the first year, when we're maybe able to see each other in real person, real life, that'd be a good time. Councilmember Savedassan?
Yeah, I do appreciate what you're saying about staff and your concern. However, I want to make sure, now it's come up and I really appreciate it. So I'm willing to dive in because I do want it to happen. And so I think that only shows that we are interested in serving our whole community. And so we can probably wait, but if there's anything we can do in small groups meanwhile, let me know, because I'm willing to do that. Yeah.
Sure.
I'll talk with
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'll talk with the mayor about staff time. Every forum that we have, the Korean Quarterly Forum, the forum tomorrow night, requires staff. There's just no, and as a council, we don't control staff. We have to ask the mayor for that. So I will, now that I know that there's council interest, I'll check with the mayor and see where that leads us.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think we're at the end of our meeting. The next meeting will be November 10th at 5 p.m. And Council President, do we normally have a meeting in December?
We normally do, but
Okay.
if the agenda is really light and nothing is
Pressing.
on a time sensitive case,
Okay.
if there's only one or two items and it could be taken straight to council, as the chair, you, along with staff input, you could.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So our next meeting will be November the 10th at 5 p.m. And if there are no other items, I'll entertain a motion. We'll just go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for being here, and have a good evening. And we'll see you again probably on Thursday night when we have our interviews, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
night.
all very
Good
much.
night.
Good
Good night.
meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.